Ethan's shuttle drifted silently toward the immense silhouette of the palace. From a distance, it looked like a jewel floating in the black sea of space, its towers and spires glinting faintly against the distant star. Even from outside, the structure seemed alive, as if it breathed in slow, deep rhythms. Yet the closer Ethan came, the more he sensed a strange emptiness. He had been trained for encounters like this: diplomatic missions, first contact protocols, negotiations with alien species, but nothing had prepared him for a silence so absolute it pressed against his chest. Normally, when approaching an alien structure of this magnitude, he would expect security drones, attendants, or at least some welcoming committee. But the landing pad was empty. The doors to the palace were open, massive and inviting, yet no one emerged. Ethan stepped out of the shuttle, his boots clinking softly on the smooth, metallic surface. The airlock hissed behind him, sealing the vessel, and he realized he was completely alone. The palace stretched in all directions, corridors of shining metal and glass that reflected the faint starlight. The lights inside pulsed faintly, giving life to the enormous structure, but the pulse felt hollow, almost sorrowful. He took a cautious step forward. The silence was so complete it made him doubt his senses. Every sound he expected, the chatter of servants, the hum of machinery, the distant echoes of alien voices, was absent. It was as if the palace itself was holding its breath. Ethan's hand hovered near his communicator, ready to send a signal, but hesitated. The mission was delicate. Any misstep could cause tension between Earth and this alien civilization. As he walked deeper into the palace, Ethan noticed the walls were covered in holographic displays. They flickered with images of courtly life, celebrations, banquets, and gatherings of beings with features so alien they made his mind spin. Some had elongated limbs, some glowed faintly under their skin, and all moved with grace he could hardly comprehend. Yet all these displays seemed frozen in time. No one was there. It was like peering into a living memory, a scene repeated over and over without the living actors to carry it. Ethan paused before one display. It showed a young alien woman laughing, her eyes bright, surrounded by attendants. He recognized the features from the reports. This had to be Lyria, the Queen's daughter. Her laughter was frozen in the hologram, but it seemed to echo faintly in the hall, a ghost of sound that made his chest tighten. He continued walking, following the flickering images, until he reached a set of enormous doors. They were made of a strange metal that seemed liquid in some angles, solid in others, and they bore intricate carvings depicting stories he could not read. There was a tension in the air, a weight of expectation that pressed down as he placed a hand on the doors. "Ethan!" A whisper floated through the corridor. It was faint, melodic, and incomprehensible. He froze, straining his ears. "Ethan!" The sound drew him forward. The doors slid open slowly, revealing a massive throne room bathed in soft, shifting light. At the center stood a throne of crystalline material, empty, glowing faintly as if it remembered the weight of its occupant. The room was enormous, with ceilings so high they vanished into shadows. Columns lined the walls, and the floor was a seamless expanse of polished stone, reflecting the light in 1,000 patterns. Yet not a single being stirred. Ethan stepped inside. His boots echoed across the floor, and he half expected the sound to awaken someone, anyone, from the silence. But the room remained still. His eyes were drawn to a raised dais at the far end. The throne sat there, imposing, yet vacant. The air was thick with a strange tension, a combination of anticipation and sorrow. As he moved closer, he noticed subtle signs of recent activity, faint traces of movement in the dustless floor, small objects slightly out of place, a flower that seemed freshly cut. Someone had been here, but had left suddenly. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. Ethan activated his communicator, "Command, this is Ethan. I've arrived at the palace. There is unusual silence here. No signs of personnel. I repeat, no personnel." The reply crackled faintly, distorted by distance. "Acknowledged, Ethan. Proceed with caution. Remember, this is the royal palace of the Queen. Any misstep could have serious consequences." He nodded to himself, though they could not see him. He took a deep breath and moved toward the throne. The closer he got, the stronger the feeling that the palace itself was alive, not in the sense of machinery or artificial intelligence, but something deeper. It was aware of him, observing him, yet holding back. Every step made him feel the weight of generations, of history and expectation pressing down. Then he heard it again, a whisper closer this time, almost like someone speaking directly into his mind. He stopped, trying to locate the source. "Ethan!" The voice was soft, melodic, carrying a warmth he could not explain. It was not threatening. It was familiar. It called to him in a way that bypassed logic and reached straight to his chest. He followed the voice instinctively, weaving through corridors and around great pillars until he reached another set of doors. These were smaller, yet equally elaborate, adorned with symbols that shimmered faintly in the light. He placed a hand on the handle, and a sudden warmth spread through his fingers. It was not mechanical, not artificial. It was living. With a deep breath, he pushed the door open. Inside, the chamber was smaller, more intimate, yet still grand. The walls were lined with soft, glowing panels that displayed memories, fleeting images of Lyria growing up, learning, laughing, studying humans from afar. And there, standing at the center, was the first living being he had seen since arriving. It was a young, alien woman. Her skin shimmered faintly, and her eyes were wide with a mixture of curiosity and something else, something deep and unspoken. She moved gracefully toward him, her steps light, yet confident. Ethan's heart pounded. He was trained to negotiate with aliens, to maintain composure in high-stakes situations, yet he felt a strange pull toward her. Not fear, not aggression, but something profoundly human. Recognition. Connection. "Ethan!" the voice whispered again, this time in words he could understand, though the sound carried an alien cadence. He nodded slowly. "Yes, I'm here. I came too." Words failed him. He did not know what he had come to say, only that he was here, and that somehow his presence mattered. The young woman stopped a few feet away, studying him. Her eyes, large and luminous, seemed to look through him, not judging, not hostile, but seeing something buried deep within him. The room felt smaller, the palace itself retreating, leaving only the two of them in this moment suspended in time. Ethan realized then that the silence of the palace was not a sign of emptiness. It was a pause, a waiting. It had been waiting for this moment, for her to meet him, and as he stood there, heart pounding, he understood something he could not yet put into words. The palace, the queen, the court, all of it had been holding its breath for this encounter. The young alien woman stepped closer, and a warmth radiated from her, spreading through the room and somehow into Ethan himself. The whispers of the palace seemed to swell, harmonizing with her presence, until the air felt alive. Ethan raised a hand, almost instinctively. She did the same, and for a brief moment, the distance between human and alien vanished. In that silent, shining chamber, he felt the first stirrings of understanding, of connection, of something that would change everything he knew about diplomacy, about life, and about the power of empathy. He did not yet know what this meant for the palace, for the queen, or for the future of human-alien relations, but he knew that whatever had fallen silent here was about to speak again, and that he was part of that awakening. And in that quiet, breathtaking moment, he realized the silence of the palace was not emptiness. It was anticipation. Ethan followed the young alien woman through corridors that seemed to pulse with life. The walls shimmered with colors he could not name, soft patterns flowing like water, reflecting the light from unseen sources. Despite the grand size of the palace, there was an intimate feeling to this path, as if the palace itself guided him toward a purpose. The woman moved gracefully, never rushing, yet always ahead of him. She occasionally glanced back, her eyes bright and searching, as if gauging his reactions, his intentions. Ethan felt an odd mixture of awe and nervousness. Every instinct told him to be careful, but something about her presence made caution feel almost unnecessary. Finally, they reached a set of larger doors, different from the others he had seen. They were heavier, more solid, and adorned with intricate carvings of celestial bodies and flowing lines. The patterns glimmered faintly, reacting to their approach. She touched the doors lightly, and they opened without a sound, revealing a room that made Ethan stop in his tracks. The chamber was vast, circular, and lined with smooth, polished surfaces that reflected faint light in 1,000 directions. At its center sat the alien queen. She was tall, regal, and radiated authority, yet her posture was not one of arrogance, but of restrained sorrow. Her features were sharp, elegant, and alien, but her eyes, enormous, luminous, and golden, held a depth of grief that Ethan could not ignore. He felt the weight of the room immediately. This was not just a ruler's chamber. It was a place of history, of decisions that shaped worlds. And now, it seemed, it was a chamber in mourning. The young woman stopped a few steps behind Ethan. He realized then that she was not only leading him to the queen, but also protecting him in some unspoken way. Her gaze flicked between him and her mother, and a tension hung in the air. The queen's voice broke the silence, deep and resonant. "You have come, human. I did not expect you so soon." Her tone was calm, but there was an edge to it, a mixture of authority and exhaustion. Ethan bowed slightly, following the strict protocols he had been taught. "Your Majesty, I am Ethan, from Earth. I come in peace and with respect for your people." The queen's eyes studied him intently. For a moment the air felt thicker, as if the palace itself was holding its breath. Then she gestured toward a seat across from her, though she did not move from her throne. "Sit, we have much to discuss, though I fear discussion will not explain everything you wish to know." Ethan sat carefully, feeling the enormity of the moment. He had faced alien rulers before, but there was something different here. The queen exuded a presence that was almost overwhelming, yet there was a human quality in her grief that made her strangely relatable. "I have been told the palace is silent," Ethan began, choosing his words carefully.
"I expected attendants, guides, guards."
"But there is nothing. No one has been seen since I arrived." The queen nodded slowly. "Yes, you are correct. The palace is silent, but not empty. It is waiting." Her eyes flicked toward the young woman behind Ethan. "My daughter left, and with her, much of the life of this place has withdrawn. It does not function as it once did."
Ethan's mind raced. "Your daughter left?"
"You mean she is gone?"
"She chose to leave," the queen said quietly.
"And yet she did not truly go."
"The palace knows. It waits for her return, or for someone she trusts." The young woman shifted slightly behind him, and Ethan realized with a jolt that she was the daughter, Lyria. Her presence was undeniable, yet she did not speak. She simply watched, her luminous eyes calm yet full of curiosity. The queen's gaze returned to Ethan. "You may not understand the weight of this palace, human. It is not merely a structure. It is alive in ways your species cannot yet comprehend. It responds to those within it, particularly those of my bloodline. When my daughter left, the palace could not bear the absence of her presence. It fell silent. Ethan swallowed hard. So... the palace itself mourns? Yes, the Queen said. Not in the way you might expect. It does not grieve as a human does, but it feels the loss of her energy, her connection. My daughter is unlike any of my people. She has empathy, a bond with life that extends beyond her kind. She is capable of understanding and feeling in ways that are rare, even among our species. Ethan's curiosity burned brighter. And you think she might feel the same way about me? The Queen studied him, her expression unreadable. That remains to be seen. She has always been fascinated by humans. You represent something new, something different. But fascination alone is not enough to awaken the palace. For a moment, the room was silent again. The kind of silence that pressed against his chest. Ethan glanced at Lyria, who stepped forward slightly, her eyes fixed on him. There was a subtle warmth in her gaze, a recognition he could not explain. Why me? He asked quietly. I am only a diplomat. I am not extraordinary. The Queen's voice softened. Sometimes it is the ordinary who become extraordinary, human. It is not strength or skill that matters here, but empathy, trust, and courage. You carry these whether you know it or not. That is why the palace and my daughter may respond to you. Ethan felt a mix of awe and apprehension. He had trained for negotiations, for battles of logic and strategy, but this was different. Here, connection mattered more than strategy. Emotion mattered more than orders. He was stepping into a world where the rules were not written, yet the stakes were higher than any mission he had undertaken. The Queen leaned forward slightly. My daughter's bond with the palace is unique. When she is happy, when she feels trust, the palace thrives. When she is fearful, lonely, or withdrawn, it falters. It fell silent because she left in search of something, or someone she could trust. I believe that perhaps you are that someone. Ethan's mind struggled to comprehend. A human could influence an alien palace, not through technology or command, but through trust. It seemed impossible, yet the energy in the room, the subtle vibrations in the walls, told him it was true. Lyria stepped closer now, her presence undeniable. The room seemed to pulse with life at her movement. Ethan felt a strange warmth, a pull toward her that was more instinct than thought. He realized, with a mixture of fear and wonder, that the palace itself seemed to acknowledge her, to awaken in response to her presence. The Queen's voice cut through his thoughts. My daughter has lived too long under the weight of duty, human. She has watched and learned, but she has never truly connected with another being in the way she needs. Perhaps you can help her, though I cannot promise what the outcome will be. Ethan swallowed again, his throat dry. I will do what I can, Your Majesty. I only hope I am worthy of her trust. The Queen nodded slowly, a faint glow in her eyes that seemed almost like relief. Worthiness is not granted. It is earned through presence, understanding, and honesty. Show her these things, and the palace may awaken. Fail, and silence will persist. For a moment the chamber was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of light and life in the walls. Ethan looked at Lyria again. She had not spoken, but her gaze held something he could not yet name. It was curiosity, yes, but also expectation, and perhaps a faint hope. He realized then that the mission he had trained for, negotiations, diplomacy, protocol, was irrelevant here. What mattered was connection, trust, and the courage to be vulnerable in a world that was vast, alien, and incomprehensible. Lyria stepped closer still, and Ethan felt the room respond. The lights shimmered, pulsing softly, and the air seemed warmer, richer. It was subtle, yet unmistakable. The palace was stirring, acknowledging the presence of two beings, one alien, one human, and the possibility of something new. The queen watched quietly, her expression unreadable but attentive. She had explained much, yet she knew that words alone could not awaken her daughter, nor restore the palace to life. That task would fall to Ethan and Lyria, and it would require more than courage. It would require empathy, patience, and perhaps a willingness to trust in something beyond reason. Ethan took a deep breath, steadying himself. He had entered this palace as a diplomat, a visitor, a stranger, but now he realized he was part of something far greater. He was part of a story that transcended politics, a story that could change the course of relations between humans and this alien civilization forever. Lyria's eyes held his, and in that silent exchange, Ethan felt the first threads of understanding. He did not yet know what she would do, nor what the palace would demand of him, but he knew one thing with certainty. The silence was ending, and he was at the center of its awakening. The queen leaned back, her hands resting lightly on the armrests of her throne. Watch carefully, human. Observe her, learn her, and perhaps, in time, you will understand why the palace fell silent. Until then, proceed with caution and respect, for the future of my daughter, my court, and perhaps your world hangs in the balance. Ethan nodded, his heart pounding with anticipation and trepidation. He was ready to step into this unknown, to face a challenge unlike any other he had encountered. And as he stood there, the first faint sounds of movement echoed through the palace, whispers of life, fragile but real, signaling the beginning of something extraordinary. For the first time since arriving, Ethan felt hope. The palace was not dead. It was waiting. And perhaps, with courage and understanding, he could help bring it, and Lyria, fully back to life. The palace remained quiet for a moment, as if it too was waiting, holding its breath. Ethan stood across from Lyria, unsure whether to speak first. The soft shimmer of the walls reflected the tension in the air, making it feel as though they were the only two beings in existence. Lyria took a step forward, her movement fluid, graceful yet deliberate. Her large, luminous eyes studied Ethan carefully, as if measuring the weight of his presence against something he could not see. Ethan noticed that she did not seem afraid, nor curious in a casual way. There was an intensity to her gaze that made him feel both exposed and welcomed at the same time. "I know why you are here," she said softly, her voice musical, carrying a tone that seemed to resonate within the palace itself. "I know what you are meant to do. I don't understand. I came here to help, but I don't know what I can do." "I'm just a human." Lyria shook her head, the movement graceful and precise.
"You are not just a human," she said. "You have
something my people rarely possess. You feel, you care. You understand without needing words for everything. That is why the palace responds to you. That is why I respond to you." Ethan felt his heart pound. He had been trained to communicate, to negotiate, to think logically under pressure. But this was different. It was not strategy or skill that mattered here. It was presence, empathy, the courage to be honest with himself and with her. He took a careful step closer. "You mean the palace? It reacts to feelings? The trust?" "Yes," she said, her eyes brightening slightly. "The palace is alive in ways humans cannot fully understand. It senses emotions, bonds, connections. When I am afraid or alone, it falters. When I am calm, when I trust, it thrives. For centuries it has been my burden to carry, my responsibility. But it is heavy, and I needed someone I could trust, someone who could help me awaken it fully." Ethan took another step, his voice steady despite the awe he felt. "And you think that person could be me?" Lyria looked down briefly, as if considering the idea, then met his eyes again. Perhaps that is why I approached you. The palace whispered your name, and I knew you were here for a reason. I could feel it." Ethan felt warmth spread through his chest. He had never thought of himself as extraordinary. He was a diplomat, trained in protocol and negotiation. But this was unlike anything he had imagined. A bond between human and alien, a bridge between species, something that could awaken a palace and perhaps change history itself. He swallowed and asked carefully, "What happens if I fail?" Lyria's expression softened, and for the first time she smiled, though it was faint, delicate, almost shy. "Then the palace remains silent, and I remain lonely. That is the risk. But I believe you will not fail. That is why I approached you, Ethan. I trust you." Her words struck him deeply. Trust. The palace had waited for centuries, holding its breath, waiting for someone who could be trusted. And now, in this moment, she had chosen him. He felt a mixture of awe, fear, and determination. He nodded slowly. "I will do my best." "I promise." Lyria's smile widened slightly. She took another step forward, reducing the space between them. The palace seemed to respond immediately. Electric backed in two rapids, the walls pulsed softly, lights shifting gently as if acknowledging the connection forming between them. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but unmistakable to Ethan. "You must understand," she said quietly, "that the palace is not merely a building. It holds memories, emotions, the essence of my people. When I left it silent, it was because I needed it to rest, to wait for someone who could awaken it without fear or harm. That someone is you, in part. But you must approach it with honesty, with openness, not as a stranger, but as someone willing to understand its soul." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to absorb the enormity of what she was saying. He had faced high-stakes negotiations and dangerous missions, but nothing had ever asked him to be vulnerable in this way. Yet he felt a strange clarity, a sense that he could rise to this challenge, that he could reach her and through her awaken the palace itself. "I understand," he said finally. "I don't know exactly how to do it yet, but I will try. I will do whatever it takes to help you, to help the palace." Lyria tilted her head slightly, as if studying the sincerity of his words. Then, slowly, she stepped closer, until there was only a small space between them. Her eyes shone with a light that seemed to come from within her, and Ethan felt a strange warmth radiating through him. It was as if the palace itself was acknowledging her trust, responding to the bond forming in that moment. Then, without warning, she reached out, not aggressively, not demanding anything, but with the quiet courage of someone offering a gift. She took his hand gently. The touch was electric, yet soothing, a connection that bridged worlds. Ethan's heart raced. He had never experienced anything like this. The warmth spread through him, deeper than the touch itself, a sense of understanding, of shared purpose, of mutual trust. The palace responded immediately. Lights shifted, pulsing rhythmically, walls glimmering, floors reflecting the energy in a dance of color and motion. It was subtle yet powerful, a silent symphony of life awakening. "You feel it," Lyria said softly. "The palace responds. It has waited so long for this, for someone to awaken it without fear, without harm. You have done that, Ethan. You have awakened it, just by being here, by being honest, by trusting." Ethan felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, though he did not understand why. It was not fear, not sadness, but the sheer magnitude of the moment. A human, standing in an alien palace, connecting with a being unlike any he had ever known, and together they had begun to bring life back to a place that had been silent for generations. Lyria's gaze softened, and she took a bold step forward, closing the remaining distance between them. She wrapped her arms gently around him, not as a gesture of power or dominance, but of trust, of connection, of shared purpose. Ethan hesitated only for a moment, then returned the gesture instinctively. The embrace was simple, human, yet profound. The palace responded as one. Lights brightened, walls pulsed, the floor shimmered with movement and color. It was subtle, beautiful, almost alive in its reaction. The silence that had weighed so heavily lifted, replaced by a rhythm, a hum, a life that had been missing for too long. Ethan pulled back slightly, still holding her hands, and looked into her eyes. I think I understand now. It's not just about the palace, it's about you, your connection to it, and the trust you give. You've been waiting for someone who can understand that. Lyria nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. Yes, and now, perhaps, we can begin to restore what was lost, not just the palace, but the life within it, the connections we have forgotten, the hope we have forgotten to hold. For the first time, Ethan saw the queen move from her throne. She had watched in silence, observing the bond forming between human and daughter. Now her expression softened, and she stepped forward, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and pride. "You have done what I feared might be impossible," she said quietly. "You have awakened my daughter, and in doing so, awakened the palace itself. This is no small feat, human. It is a gift beyond measure." Ethan felt a swell of emotion. He had trained for diplomacy, for negotiation, for navigating alien cultures. But this was beyond anything he had imagined. He had become part of something extraordinary, something that transcended protocol and politics. Lyria squeezed his hands gently. The palace will continue to awaken as we work together. It will respond to our trust, our care, and our presence. But you must understand, Ethan, that this is only the beginning. The palace, my people, and perhaps the future of both our worlds depend on this connection. It is fragile, but it is real. Ethan nodded, feeling a deep sense of responsibility and purpose. He had not come to this palace expecting to change anything. Yet here he was, at the center of a bond that could alter the course of history. The queen observed them quietly, her expression one of cautious hope. She knew that the journey was only beginning, that trust could be fragile, and that the palace's life depended on her daughter's willingness to connect with another being. But she also knew that the bond forming between Ethan and Lyria was genuine, and that it held the potential to heal the silence that had gripped the palace for so long. Ethan and Lyria stood together, hands intertwined, feeling the subtle pulse of life around them. The palace shimmered, vibrant and awake, as if acknowledging that trust, connection, and empathy could bridge worlds. And in that moment, both human and alien realized something profound. They were not just standing in a palace. They were standing at the threshold of a new era, where understanding and compassion could reshape history. The silence had ended, replaced by a quiet rhythm of life, a harmony that spoke of hope, trust, and the extraordinary power of connection. Ethan looked at Lyria, and she smiled, a faint, knowing smile that said everything words could not. Together, they had awakened the palace, and together they would face whatever came next. The palace seemed to breathe around them. Every shimmer of light, every subtle hum in the walls, carried a renewed energy, as if the structure itself had finally remembered life. Ethan and Lyria stood together, hands still intertwined, feeling the pulse beneath their feet, a rhythm that spoke of vitality and awakening. The silence that had weighed so heavily for centuries had lifted, replaced by a quiet song of possibility. The queen stepped forward, her regal posture softened by a faint, relieved smile. She had watched the bond form between human and daughter with a cautious heart, unsure whether it could withstand the weight of tradition and expectation. Now she saw it clearly. The palace responded not just to her daughter, but to trust, empathy, and courage, qualities she recognized in Ethan. "You have done what I feared might be impossible," she said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of centuries. "You have awakened my daughter. You have awakened the palace, and in doing so, you have reminded us all of the power of connection, even across worlds." Ethan bowed slightly, feeling the weight of her words. "I did not do this alone, Your Majesty. Lyria guided me. I only followed her." The Queen's eyes softened, glimmering with unspoken emotion. Yes, she has always been extraordinary, but it is rare for her to place her trust so completely in another. "That is a gift, human, and it reflects the heart you have shown. You are part of this now, as much as she is." Lyria smiled faintly at him, a mixture of pride and warmth. "We did this together," she said softly. "The palace responded to both of us because we trusted one another, because we connected." Ethan looked around, realizing that the palace was alive in ways he had never imagined. The lights pulsed with soft colors. Corridors shifted subtly to reflect the flow of energy, and faint whispers, not words, but echoes of memory and emotion, filled the air. Every step they took seemed to awaken hidden corners of the structure, as if it had been sleeping, waiting for the right moment, waiting for someone who could bridge the distance between its ancient life and the present. He understood then what the Queen had said earlier. The palace was not merely a building, it was a living being, and its vitality depended on the empathy, trust, and presence of those within it. And now, through his bond with Lyria, it had begun to thrive again. The Queen gestured toward the central hall, a vast chamber that had been silent for decades. "Come," she said, "see for yourself what has changed." They walked together, Ethan and Lyria side by side, the Queen leading the way. The hall had once been grand, filled with the hum of life, the bustle of attendance, the echoes of history. Now, as they entered, the hall glowed with renewed vibrancy. Light shimmered from walls and columns, soft but bright. The floor reflected the energy in subtle waves, and faint holographic images appeared, depicting the palace as it had been centuries ago. Not frozen memories, but living echoes, active and aware. This was no longer a silent monument to the past. It was alive, responsive, breathing with the pulse of the present. He could feel it in his chest, a connection that was part awe, part wonder, part recognition of the extraordinary bond he now shared with Lyria. The Queen watched him carefully, her gaze sharp yet gentle. "The palace will continue to awaken," she said. "But it requires more than trust. It requires patience, understanding, and courage. You have begun this process, human. Now it is up to all of us to nurture it." Ethan nodded, feeling the responsibility settle over him like a cloak. He was no longer a visitor, no longer merely a diplomat. He was part of something greater, something that transcended species, tradition, and expectation. His role was not to command, but to connect, to care, to understand. Lyria squeezed his hand gently. "We can do this," she said. "Together. The palace has waited for centuries for this moment. It is patient, but it will flourish when we nurture it, and perhaps, in time, it will teach us what it has learned through all those years." As they moved deeper into the hall, they noticed subtle signs of life returning. Small doors opened along the walls, revealing corridors once empty but now populated by attendants and servants, moving carefully, watching, but no longer fearful. Holographic images shifted from static displays to interactive simulations, depicting the palace as a living organism, aware of the people within it. Ethan realized that the palace had not been dead. It had been waiting for a bond strong enough to awaken it fully, And now, through the trust he and Lyria shared, it was alive again. The Queen's gaze followed him, sharp and discerning. "You have done more than awaken the palace," she said softly. "You have reminded my daughter, and perhaps even myself, that life is not only about duty and expectation, it is about connection, about trust, about reaching beyond what is safe or known to embrace what is possible." Ethan felt warmth rise in his chest. He had trained for moments like this in theory, in simulations, but nothing had prepared him for the weight of truth in her words. This was not diplomacy, not negotiation. This was the raw, powerful force of connection, something that could shape worlds without a single command, without a single law, without any technology beyond the courage to care. Lyria looked up at him, her eyes shining. "The palace responds to trust," she said again, "but it also teaches us. It reminds us that fear, isolation, and doubt can wither even the strongest structures. Empathy, honesty, and courage bring life back. You have helped me understand that, Ethan, and I think together we can help others understand it too." Ethan's heart swelled. He realized that this was bigger than him, bigger than diplomacy, bigger than any mission he had undertaken. This was a chance to reshape not only the palace, but perhaps the relationship between human and alien civilizations. One simple bond, one act of trust and empathy, had begun to heal centuries of silence. The Queen moved closer, her hands resting lightly on the armrests of her throne. "You have done well," she said, "but the work is only beginning. My daughter's bond with the palace is unique, and her choice to trust you has opened the door. Now we must all nurture it, ensure that this connection endures, and prepare for the future it can bring." Ethan nodded solemnly. "I understand, Your Majesty. I will do my part." "I promise." Lyria smiled at him, a quiet, radiant expression that filled him with hope. "You have already done more than you know, and together we can guide the palace back to life, one step at a time, one trust at a time." They walked further into the palace, their hands still intertwined, and Ethan felt a strange but comforting rhythm in the walls, the lights, and the floors. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but unmistakable. Life returning, slowly but steadily. The palace, once silent for generations, had begun to speak again through the pulse of its being, responding to trust, empathy, and connection. For the first time since his arrival, Ethan felt at home, not because of familiarity, but because of understanding. He understood that the palace's silence had not been emptiness, it had been waiting. Waiting for someone willing to bridge the gap between worlds, someone brave enough to trust, to care, and to connect. The Queen watched them, her expression one of hope, tempered with caution. She knew that the palace's revival was only the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, lessons to learn, and obstacles to overcome. But she also knew that the bond formed between her daughter and Ethan had the power to reshape not only the palace, but the future of their civilizations. Ethan looked at Lyria, feeling the warmth of her hand, the steady pulse of her presence, and the strength of the trust they had built together. "I think the palace will thrive," he said quietly. "And maybe we can help it teach others what we've learned." Lyria nodded, her luminous eyes reflecting the soft, pulsing light of the hall. "Yes, it will teach us if we are willing to listen. And together, we can help it guide others, just as it has guided us." The palace seemed to respond, lights shimmering brighter, corridors opening wider, subtle hums and vibrations filling the air. Life in all its alien complexity had returned, not through force or command, but through connection. The human and the alien had bridged the silence, and in doing so, had opened the door to a future filled with possibility. The Queen took a step closer, her gaze softening as she looked at her daughter and the human standing beside her. "You have reminded us all that even the most ancient and powerful structures, even those of a civilization like mine, can be awakened by something as simple and as extraordinary as trust."
Ethan felt a sense of calm determination settle over him.
The palace was alive, Lyria was trusting, and the queen had accepted him as part of this new reality. The silence that had defined the palace for generations had ended, replaced by a rhythm of life, hope, and renewal. He and Lyria stood together in the central hall, hands intertwined, feeling the pulse of the palace beneath their feet. The lights shimmered, corridors shifted gently, and faint whispers of the past and present danced through the air. Everything was alive. Everything was possible. For the first time, Ethan realized that this was not just a palace or a mission. This was the beginning of something extraordinary, a connection that could shape the future, a trust that could heal silence, and a hope that could last beyond lifetimes. Together, human and alien stood at the heart of the awakened palace, ready to face whatever came next, with trust, courage, and the knowledge that empathy could bridge worlds. And for the first time in centuries, the palace was not silent.